Shapiro's The United States of Europe. Using an American view to make the EU a little less boring. And this week, our special guest is Henk Ovink. You don't know who he is yet, but he's incredibly impressive. And now, your suave and charming host, me, Greg Shapiro. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our show. And this week, I'm experimenting with a new teleprompter auto cue system known as my laptop just below the screen. We'll see how that works. Hi, I'm Greg Shapiro, the American Netherlander, as we do every week, giving the EU the respect they deserve by making fun of them just like anybody else. As a reminder, please do subscribe to us on YouTube, Broadcast Amsterdam, the channel, or my own Greg Shapiro channel on YouTube. And this week's special guest is so important, he's not here in the studio. In fact, we had to take our cameras to him, Henk Ovink, the Dutchman, who is helping America prevent the next Hurricane Sandy in New York. We'll get to him in a minute. But first, the headlines. The Europe-Asia Summit in Milan. Yes, despite high expectations for a breakthrough between EU, Ukraine, and Russia, things got off to a rocky start when Germany's Angela Merkel was kept waiting for a meeting with Vladimir Putin. Putin, who was celebrating with the Serbians in Serbia. Diplomacy was stretched to the max as Merkel indicated how much she enjoys not starting a meeting on time, as Putin indicated how much he enjoys starting a meeting sober with Merkel. Putin kept his meeting with Angela Merkel short, only to rush off and hang out with his old friend Silvio Berlusconi from about 2 to 4 in the morning. Merkel was quoted as saying that Putin lives in his own mental universe. More accurately, both Putin and Berlusconi are living in the same universe, just one that hasn't existed since about 1964. In other news, international investors continue their selling off of European stocks, causing some uncertainty, suddenly doubting European Central Bank Chairman Mario Draghi's pledge to do whatever it takes to keep the Eurozone intact. While the deliberate ambiguity of whatever it takes worked to revive the Euro economy 2 years ago, a group of literal-minded Germans is now suing the ECB, European Central Bank, for being unspecific as to the rules. Draghi has now amended his statement to say whatever it takes except for printing extra money, buying up the bonds of weak economies, or anything that's been proven to work everywhere else in the world. But there is good news on the euro economy. Ireland has largely recovered from its disastrous banking crisis by luring multinational companies such as Apple and Google to move their headquarters there. One of the generous tax deals for multinationals is called the Double Irish, which companies pay virtually no EU tax. Ireland has now agreed to discontinue the Double Irish while continuing to offer their ludicrously low corporate tax rate of 12.5%, otherwise known as the double standard. Faced with losses of 1 trillion euros per year from tax fraud and evasion, EU finance ministers forged a landmark agreement to share formerly classified banking information with each other starting next year. With the growing threat of hackers stealing confidential bank information, the EU figured we might as well just beat them to the punch and reveal everything already. The decision was welcomed by Switzerland, who will continue to welcome all the tax cheats and frauds from Europe with open arms. The Euro Parliament coalition of far-right politician Nigel Farage is in danger of collapse after the resignation of one of its MEPs, members of European Parliament. To form a coalition in the European Parliament, it's necessary to have 25 MEPs from 7 different countries, and now Farage is reported to be seeking the help of German Dadaist comedian politician Martin Sonneborn. Sonneborn's only demand is that the coalition change its name to an Alliance of Idiots and Fools, which, in the case of these guys, might just work. Now it's time for our weekly good news, bad news. The topic this week, jump-starting the European economy, starting with the bad news. While the U.S. economy has largely recovered from the Great Recession, Europe seems to be sliding backward into deflation. What's to be done? Well, the good news, the European Central Bank is now taking action to grow again, like lowering interest rates below zero. What, like they'll pay me to borrow money? Not exactly, no. Meaning that if a bank wants to park its money in savings instead of loaning it out, they will now have to pay extra. The bad news, now no one is saving and no one is loaning. The money is basically completely stuck and the money is being loaned to no one. So the good news, there's a proven strategy that does work in Japan, America, even in England. It's called quantitative easing. What's that? Printing a bunch of money, buying up the bonds of weak economies, and flooding the financial system with cash. The bad news, there's one country that specifically objects so strongly to this strategy that they're fighting it every step of the way. German bankers have their 999 strategy, arguing that if Italy, Greece, and Spain get bailed out now, it will just be rewarding their bad behavior and will be doomed to repeat the crisis all over again. Well, the good news, ECB chief Mario Draghi is pushing another strategy to get banks lending again, securitization, which is described as banks take loans and then package them into bonds, which are then resold to investors like hedge funds. The bad news, isn't that exactly the same kind of bullcrap that got us into the last crisis? Are they seriously pushing this plan? When Mario Draghi said, whatever it takes, I didn't picture a carbon copy of the CDOs that packaged the crap with so much perfume it smelled like eau de merde. You're making me agree with Germany, for God's sake. Isn't there anything else we can do? Yes. The good news, there's another successful strategy from the US called the banking stress test, otherwise known as killing the walking dead. A hunt for zombie banks. Like the living dead, the zombie banks act like they're alive, but actually they're just trying to eat the brains of living banks and make the world over in their living dead zombie image. Just picture it like that. The bad news. The EU did try this already a couple years ago, but it was on a country-by-country basis. And what do you know? Some of the countries deliberately lied to protect their own banks, the banks which ended up dying anyway, and the zombies live. The good news, this time it's different. The ECB says no more country-by-country stress test. Now the ECB has created the SSM, the Single Supervisory Mechanism, and it is like super S&M. They will use sadism and masochism to identify and punish the weak banks, make them suffer. So, who's in charge? Well, it is this woman, Danielle Nui, a sort of dominatrix for European banks. The bad news, yes, that was a sexist joke, but compare that to the comments of bankers themselves like Dombre, who said she's concentrated and in control, but that's not a negative thing. He did clarify that women making decisions are unladylike. The good news is that on the 26th of October, the 26th, coming right up, the ECB bank stress test will publish its results and there will be some pain. But hopefully the zombie banks will finally die. And now, it's time to introduce our guest for the week. I first came across Henk Ovink on the front page of the International New York Times with the headline, "Letting Water In to Stop the Flooding." He is the Dutch water engineering expert who he was working at the Rijkswaterstaat in the Netherlands to cope with rising water levels. Now he's working with the Obama administration in New York to prevent or prepare for the next Hurricane Sandy. When I talked to Henk Ovink, he told me what it's like to ask the White House for $1 billion. He told me about schools in New Jersey that will not let you reference the term climate change. And he told me about how the Netherlands, while a model of water management for the world, can still learn a thing or two, as you can see in the city of Almere, 5 meters underwater, which just built a brand new hospital, which has a backup generator in the basement. We take you now to Pakhuis de Zwijger in Amsterdam for Henk Ovink. Hi. Well, I'm very lucky to have Mr. Henk Ovink here with you're one of the busiest men on the planet, so thank you for joining us.
I'm perfectly happy to be here.
Well, good, good.
Yeah.
We have just talked about the lead up, the history, and right now you're back in the Netherlands for a very small window of time. Yeah, we were just talking about the specifics of you getting your job with Sean Donovan and working for the White House. First of all, Sean Donovan came over here, yes? Can you give us a little salient background? What was it like when he was going through the tunnels of the North-South line?
The reason why Sean went to the Netherlands, Secretary Donovan at that time, but also chair of the Hurricane Sandy Rebuilding Task Force, the task force President Obama set up right after Sandy to, get a comprehensive, responsive reaction and respond to the New York, New Jersey region. Donovan is a secretary. He knows the region. He's a born and raised New Yorker, married a Jersey girl, was commissioner on the Bloomberg. So no, he knows his place. But he didn't know anything about water. So he went to the Netherlands to learn about how do we deal with water and why the Netherlands, is this innovation lab on water. But we've been that for ages, and so we know how to deal with water. So he came to the right place.
Right. Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to tour him around for 2 days. I was at that time acting Director General for Spatial Planning and Water Affairs.
Right. For the Dutch
government. I set up a tour of 2 days with municipalities, water boards, Rijkswaterstaat, science institutes, and the Delta program. Yeah. Showcasing anything we are doing with water. And
how often do you get to do that, by the way? It must have been fairly fun.
No, actually, I wish I could do that more often, but we get a lot of people from Congress even, from the United States Congress, as well as people from Japan or Singapore or from Africa and Myanmar. All over the world, people come and watch, want to see and experience how the Dutch do this. For all those ages, how did we build this country out of land?
Do you take him to the Hondsbos-Zeewering?
Yeah, no, I didn't take him to the Hondsbos-Zeewering.
That's the greatest spot, Where one side is the sea and the other side is...
Wow, no. I took him to Rotterdam and The Hague and Amsterdam, Kampen, Almere, showed him our big infrastructure, but also our small infrastructure. Also showed and talked about how you do it, not only projects and engineering, but actually the governance question, the finance question, and the science. The science and the data behind all our decisions on water safety and water quality is as important as the projects themselves. And he was amazed, but he's also a very nice guy, so we had fun. It was not only 2 days of hard work, it was also 2 days of getting to know each other. And he flew back to the U.S. and we kept, being in contact, and then he asked me to join his task force to start to work on long-term issues, on regional coordination, and on innovation.
But there was a point, wasn't there, where you said you had to write this email to Sean Donovan of the Obama administration, sort of offering yourself for this position?
Oh yeah, when he went back, and I was on the brink of 2 jobs, I wrote him an email saying, if you think, because I wanted to be sure who this guy was, I only met him for 2 days. If you think Sandy is a game changer for the U.S., and we all know how the U.S. is thinking about climate change.
Well, some in the U.S. are.
Some in the U.S. are. It's very hard to get Congress over the line of agreeing on measures that actually make sense when it comes to climate change. But thinking about Sandy, President Obama knew immediately this was his opportunity. His inaugural address he held in January of that year, of 2013, was all about climate change. He's a serious president, and he's totally serious about climate change. Well, so his task force was dedicated to that, and Sean took over that dedication. But I had to be sure. So I asked him, if you think Sandy could be the game changer, which I think it is, I'd like to work with you to make that happen. Drive innovation, get to a new standard of resiliency, and do things really different so the US could be an example to the rest of the world. New York can set a new standard to the rest of the world. How big cities in deltas deal with climate change and, work with it with communities, with people, with designers, with scientists, with mayors,
Yeah.
and come up with processes and solutions that actually make sense.
I'm still wondering how you really do that, because we talked about the whole Rebuild by Design project and Is it your outsider status that helps you get these disparate groups of people talking to each other? I mean, you were just describing this before the interview, the moment when you found yourself as a Dutchman, not a U.S. citizen, in front of a panel in Washington, D.C., at the Obama administration, housing, urban development, and you've got to stand there and say, what you're doing is quick fix, but we need something long-term and open-ended, and I need $1 billion. What was that like?
No, it's very hard in an institutional world to anywhere around the world, and the U.S. is not the only. I mean, it's very hard in the Netherlands. It's very hard in Japan. So it's also very hard in the U.S. in an institutional world where the rules and boundaries are set to say, okay, let's do it different. I want $1 billion for innovation projects to build towards a new standard of resilience, but I don't know what those projects are because we don't know what the problem is. We need to invest, get the talent of the world to work collaboratively with the talent of the region in a research process, and only after that process we can identify vulnerabilities, interdependencies, and possible opportunities, and then start to work on projects. And then in the end of that, which is a year down the road, I will say, these are the 10 or 5 or 7 best projects. Let's invest that money in and get to that standard. But I need the buy-in up front. Otherwise, I could never drive such a process forward. I didn't only come up with a process. I made it very practical. You have to bring solutions on the ground fast, and at the same time have a long-term process. You always have to match those two terms. Otherwise, you will never get to a new standard. Otherwise, innovation stays paper. And I don't believe in paper. I really believe in creating facts on the ground. There's a huge distrust towards government. More in the US than in the Netherlands, but still,
really?
I think it's a worldwide problem.
No, you're right. And it's certainly with the EU sort of.
So I created Rebuild by Design as a program on the edge of federal government, edge of state and city government, edge of the science world, edge of the philanthropic world.
Not the center, but the edge.
Always on the edge, creating room for all of these institutions to step into this, I call it a sabbatical detour, a little sidestep out of reality, to step in there and be more frank, invest a little more time.
Let me be frank as well. Sabbatical and detour from reality, these are not terms that Americans normally sign up for.
No, I know.
Certainly not with a paycheck or whatever, a budget. But that's amazing.
I used the image of this sabbatical detour we developed in the International Architecture Biennale in Rotterdam in 2012. And I actually used it for a group of 30 funders. Used my ideas on the process. And this started this debate. This is the same as what I told you before. Also the discussion with the White House talking about the dollars. It was the beginning of a discussion, not the end. Of course you don't trust me. Of course you don't give me $1 billion. Which is, I think it's good.
Well, of course. But I mean, you also mentioned that wonderful moment when Melanie Schultz was over there as well for the UN. Can you just tell that moment of how that little wonderful headline developed of the Dutch are coming back to save Manhattan?
For Melanie Schultz and the Dutch government, it was actually a clear case. We have a 400-year relationship with the US. We started Manhattan. We are good partners internationally. We like to keep that good partnership. But there's something else. We are tremendously good at dealing with water. And water safety, water quality, water scarcity. And we want to sell our knowledge all over the world.
Which is a good calling card, isn't it?
Which is, So when Donovan asked Schultz,
Yeah.
can I borrow your guy?
Yeah.
She said yes, because the Netherlands is going to help out the US.
Yeah.
Little brother is helping out big brother instead of the other way around.
Yeah,
so
how about that?
We're coming back to help and solve your problem.
Now, you said you're no stranger to America. You've traveled over there. You know your way around. And yet, is it, as a Dutchman, going to Manhattan, does it feel kind of like a homecoming?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I worked in the US, helped some mayors get elected.
Okay.
Campaigned for Obama in Florida.
Okay.
Worked with universities across the United States. So it's not a strange country.
Oh, I meant as a Dutchman going back to Manhattan.
Oh, yeah. It's always homecoming.
And, and just in terms of water, I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
How close are we to having a canal on Canal Street in Manhattan?
No, not very close.
Come on. Is
No,
it going to happen?
No, it's not going to happen.
Really?
No, we don't want a canal on Canal Street.
We got to get the Dutch imprint
No,
back.
I don't. Looking back means moving forward differently.
Okay.
I mean, it's good to have your history and know your stories. Sometimes good to bring some things back.
Yeah.
Most of the times it's good to bring something better. Yeah.
Well, a lot of what you're talking about, though, is, okay, maybe not a canal on Canal Street, but the idea of the low-lying areas, make that into a park where kids can play unless it's flooded, and then it can flood. But kids as well, you were mentioning reaching out to the newer, younger generation in the U.S. as well. And did I hear you say that in parts of New Jersey, when you want to go to the schools and talk about Hurricane Sandy awareness or whatever, is it true that you're not allowed to talk about climate change in a school?
Yeah, actually, I think it's actually true.
All right.
Actually, you can talk about it, but you can't teach about it.
Okay. All right.
So I could actually go there and talk about it.
Oh, so you're just as an independent... okay.
But it can't be part of an educational program.
Right. How are we going to do that? And sorry, I have to make a jump back to Europe and to the Netherlands. You just mentioned this kind of awareness that the Dutch might be losing. Like you mentioned, the electoral,
Gemeenteraadsverkiezingen.
The gemeenteraadsverkiezingen in the local elections last March, on the campaign platforms, there was
hardly talk. No talk about water.
And I believe your quote off the record was, "What the? How can this be?" And you mentioned the example of the hospital. Which hospital? 5 meters under sea level.
Yeah, and the emergency generator in the basement. But there's another story. We did a science fair on the Delta program in July with the Delta Commissioner Wim Kuijken in Almere.
In Almere.
One of the commissioners, Henk Meijer, was there.
Okay.
He was hosting, and he said, "I have to admit," that's what he said. When we formed our new administration and had champagne on the table and celebrated that we had an agreement, all of a sudden one of my colleagues said, "Who has water in it under his responsibility?"
Sure.
After the negotiation.
Right.
It was not part of the discussion.
They somehow left that, wow.
Almere is 2 to 5 meters below sea level.
Yeah, well, you just take it for granted, I guess.
They didn't talk, no.
Yeah.
Taking it for granted it's not possible.
It's like suicide at this point. Like,
we all have to be aware. And of course, I know we pay a lot of taxes, so we say, let's government solve it.
Sure.
That's not the way forward. Water is part of our culture. It should be part of our educational institutes. It should be part of our system of raising your kids. People should think about water, not as a threat, but as part of our way of living.
Sure.
And understand what it means to live in a country that is for 26% below sea level, but only 29% above sea level.
Right.
We're vulnerable to water, which is not bad. It's the thing, it's a fact.
Yeah.
Let's secure that culture of water.
Yeah.
Moreover, let's build on this culture of water, a culture of excellence.
Yeah.
So we can not only safeguard our own country, but export that knowledge and make sure that that water problem all over the world is addressed. Because the water problem is going to be far more important in the future.
Yeah.
Billions of 15% of the world's GDP is going to be affected by water disasters in 2050.
Right. That's
15%.
next year.
2050.
2050, thank you. Okay.
If we don't start to work on it in a different way, in our urbanizing world where people are living far more in deltas and in riverine systems,
right. And
there's another thing on scarcity.
Yeah.
Because we don't deal with the water safety all over the world, people actually have to retreat and move away from dangerous places.
Right.
There's a thing on these dangerous places. There's water.
Yeah.
So people move away from the water.
Okay.
Not having any access to clean water anymore.
Right.
That is actually another threat.
Yeah.
So not dealing with the safety threat builds in the threat of scarcity.
Yeah.
So the water problem is connected to our economy, our culture, and ecology.
Yeah.
We have to deal with it. The Dutch are in a great position to ignite that debate, start that conversation, lead it all over the world.
Yeah,
And I think, what we did with Sandy in the New York, New Jersey region was a showcase.
Yeah.
I think we have to bring that showcase back home again and turn the Netherlands into this living lab of water and reignite that culture of water and then go back to the world and say, here.
Well, even with EU. I mean, we were just talking about the new EU commissioners, and you mentioned Almere, that even in the Netherlands, sometimes we're forgetting to deal with water. Now that we've got the Netherlands water technology ready for export, saving Manhattan, what, if anything, is the Netherlands prepared to bring to Brussels and to the rest of Europe? Well, for more of that interview, you'll just have to watch online. But that's a reminder to sign up for our YouTube channel, Broadcast Amsterdam, or my Greg Shapiro channel on YouTube. And for United States of Europe, hey, we'll see you next week.